take it. Friends, is she watching? Very good. Are we ready? Is this working? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Is this working? I can't hear it. Right, let's make a start. This is part of the dark side of psychology. My name is Darren. I'm on my third year of a psych PhD. I've been roped into doing the NLP lecture because I have some NLP experience. I've been doing it for quite a long time. I present at some of the conferences, that kind of thing. So, has anybody heard of NLP before? Anyone? Do you like to judge people? Who here likes to judge people? Make snap decisions on what they think? Would you like to do it better? Let's look at that then. So, by the end of the hour, if we do any of these, I'll be impressed. So we're going to look at what NLP is, how it began, what are the tenets of NLP, what it means, if anything, because it might not mean anything at all. What's it about? It's about communication and learning, but we'll look at that. There's a guy called Richard Bandler and John Grinder, and in their book, in Richard Bandler's book, A User's Manual for the Brain, how presumptuous is that title? A User's Manual for the Brain. NLP is defined as the study of the structure of subjective experience, and what can be calculated from that is predicated upon the belief that all behavior has a structure. Now, you're all psychology students, so who believes that's true? All behavior has a structure. By the way, you can shout out, you can jump in, I don't care, that's fine. If you disagree with me, shout out. Does anybody agree with that or disagree with that? Excellent, all of you agree. So this is a quick caveat. I got permission from Susie to use this, mainly because I gave a talk at the conference earlier this year at the NLP International Conference, and she said she's very concerned that most people in the community are unable to grasp that without proper published academic studies, the methods and methodology will never be acceptable in mainstream coaching or psychology. Have you seen what you're going to do in the seminar after this? Not tonight, but after this. We're going to talk about this. So how did it start? Bandler was a mathematician and Grinder was a linguist. And they made the connection between the structure of language and maths and formula. And they decided to study and copy other psychologists such as Erik Erikson, who, and essentially what they did was they modeled the strategies of these professionals and said, well, what is Erikson doing here? When he's talking to a client, a patient, what is he doing? What language patterns is he using? Are those language patterns transferable outside of a therapy perspective? And if we copied them, what would happen? Does that make sense? It's easy, really, isn't it? So these are the main guys in the field. There's a couple of books here from the early 70s. People like Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir. Virginia Satir was a family therapist, and they modeled her and copied her and how she did things, because she had a really good track record of getting to the root of problems within families. And they said, how is she doing this? One of the known issues about NLP, if you've ever heard of it, is that it's not necessarily scientifically valid. Does anybody know that? Everyone? Perfect. When you want to validate anything, you put it through a rigorous session. But from 1972 or so, there's been a distinct lack of credibility in NLP because no one is using the techniques and the systems to say, look, let's create experiments on this. All they did was, they got the first three guys you saw at the screen earlier, all they did was they said, this is NLP, this is what you do, go off and do it. And they made a shed load of money in the 70s and 80s, but no one actually validated and backed up what was going on, and no one created, even though they talk about language structure, no one created a structure for NLP necessarily. How is that any different? Does anybody know here about Allport and trait theory, things like this? So we're going to talk about that as well. How is that any different to what Allport did with traits? When he said, well, these are 18,000 words that describe behaviors. He whittled it down to fewer, but the point is, he had to start somewhere and make something up. But then other people decided to continue the experiments and whittle down those 18,000. With NLP, that didn't happen. They just said, this is NLP, and it kind of got a cult following. Now, from an NLP perspective, the tenets of NLP, the map is not the territory. Does anybody know what that means? Korzybski said that how you construct yourself, how you construct your world around you, is just a map of the territory. It's not reality, it's just your reality. And your map is different to your map, is different to your map, and my map. You are a mind-body system. If you don't think that's true, while you're walking with your friends, ask them a really difficult question, and they tend to stop to think about what you've just asked them. Human experience has a structure that can be represented by the sensory modalities. Now, I'm going to guess that a lot of you here have heard of VAK, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It's kind of this learning styles, how we prefer to learn. Are you a visual learner, auditory learner, that kind of thing. Now, this is another controversial field within NLP, because before 2009, there weren't that many studies about this at all. We'll look at that in a bit. The person is not the behavior. Oh, no, each behavior has a positive intention. So everything you do has a positive intention. When you look back at a behavior that you might think was a bit dodgy, for you, unconsciously, there'd have been a reason for it, like safety. Does that make sense? You might have done something that contravened. Yes?
What about people that have mental issues that just kill people because they want to?
Why is that a mental issue?
For example...
Can you kill someone without having a mental issue?
Sorry?
Can you kill someone without having a mental issue?
Exactly. Yeah, you can.
From an NLP perspective, if we look at how they construct themselves, you then start to look at things like empathy. And if they have no empathy, then they're sociopaths, psychopaths, that kind of thing. So you could still break down what they did and how they did it, and how they thought about it, using these tenets. So a person is not the behavior. So you can say that was a stupid action without saying you are stupid. We kind of know that, don't we? And a person cannot not communicate. What does that mean? Yes, sir?
Not saying something is very much. So if you were to propose in therapy and someone said something to me and I remain silent, that is a form of communication.
Of course. And also then you start to look at body language and facial expressions and eyebrow raising and position and posture and how close you're sitting next to someone and all this other stuff. There's a myriad of things that we do that don't require us actually uttering a word. Now, it's useful that I haven't got my glasses on because I can't see everybody's faces and how many people are in the room. But if I were watching your faces now with glasses on, I might see the ones who are bored, the ones who are intrigued, the ones who are watching Hollyoaks on their laptop, whatever. You know, that kind of thing. But I am watching, as I look at you guys, as I look at anyone, you watch how they respond to you. And from their response, whether they utter a word or not, you get something. And that also moves on to the next one. The meaning of the communication is the response it elicits. In other words, if someone, this is contentious, but if someone is offended by your words and you say, I didn't mean to offend you, what they're saying is, actually you did. The meaning of the communication is the response it elicits. You did mean to offend. Or, if you want to flip that, you knew it would offend. But offence is taken, not given, isn't it? Offence is taken, not given. So how can you offend someone if you didn't mean it? If you always, this is a really good one. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Make sense? No failure, any feedback? I'm not convinced about that. People with the most flexibility control the situation. This one here, that's going to drive what we're doing for the next 45, 50 minutes. If you have more flexibility in your ability to communicate your emotional state, if you can control how you're thinking about what you're thinking about in the moment, you have the flexibility to control the situation. Whether that's an interview, an argument, with your friends down the pub, your mum, your dad, whatever. There's absolutely tons of principles within NLP. This is where it's useful. Self-development, self and other awareness, coaching and mentoring. You heard of life coaches? Generally, they do an entire weekend course on NLP and then call themselves a life coach. It's awesome. Language, words and meaning. There's the VAK, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic again. Cognitive intentions. That's me sneaking my PhD research into this lecture. Patterns of thinking. Rapport. Who's good at rapport making here? Who thinks they're good at rapport? Most of the blokes will. I think they are. All of us, right? Pacing and leading. We're going to use that in a little while. Metaphors. Metaphors, when you use a metaphor, it crosses the parts of the brain, so you create different connections, and they're really, really useful for learning. They're a big part of NLP. Reframing, we're going to look at that, and values. Values are really important too. There's tons and tons of techniques. There are so many techniques. In reality, the techniques that came out of NLP that were working and did good and they were tested, then became CBT. Is anybody? It's cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's a bunch of techniques in CBT that are also in NLP, but the CBT one you can get a degree in. The NLP one you can't. So I'm looking at my notes. I've never done an NLP lecture before because it's never been asked for. So some of the nonsense that's taught. Has everybody seen this? 55% of all communication is non-verbal. And what they say is that 7%, we only need to say 7% of our communication as a word output, which is just nonsense. Where that comes from is an original study on anger and anger management. And what it boiled down to was the fact that the people in the experiment, you knew when that other person was angry. They didn't need to say anything. So of course it looks like 50% was non-verbal because they were annoyed with you. Okay? That's what they don't tell you. They just on NLP courses, they teach this stuff as if it's real. For example, arms crossed. How many people here have got their arms crossed? How many people are being defensive right now with their arms crossed? Or are you just comfortable? How does it affect men and women differently? How can that be true for everyone? Neck touching, dilated pupils, leaning forward. You might need a pee. Doesn't mean you're actually interested in what I'm saying. But the interesting bit is that. That's why it's on the dark side of psychology. It's NLP for manipulation. Who here thinks manipulation is a bad word? Good, a whole room full of sociopaths. That's brilliant. It's not a bad word. You manipulate people all the time. You manipulate your friends, you manipulate your parents, you manipulate your siblings. We just don't call it manipulation. But that's what you're doing. Who disagrees? So let's look at how we can... Remember I said at the beginning, do you like to judge people? Well, we can start to do it better. How do we communicate? There's tons and tons of models of communication. Depending on what modules you've picked for your course, you'll come across a whole rake of them. When two people are communicating, if their cognitive intentions, my word, are not matched, there will be a certain amount of misunderstanding. So look at the top one there, the VAK. Now, what NLP teaches is that if someone is a predominantly visual learner, and you're in the audience now, you're loving the pictures, you're loving the slides because it does things for you. But if you're auditory, you're probably not paying attention to the slides. You prefer to listen to me, which is weird. But if you're kinesthetic, we've missed you out completely. You want a handout. Does that make sense? And that's how NLP teaches how we communicate as well, because what we do is we say, I'm not really getting this, Darren. It's not ringing any bells. Auditory. Yeah, I'm not really grasping this. Kinesthetic. You know, I'm not really seeing what you're saying, or I do see what you're saying. It's crystal clear, visual. So what NLP teaches is that in our communication model, we give you our representation systems in our language as we speak. And if you guys are attuned to listen to that kind of language, we can start to manipulate people. Should we try it now? It's an interactive session. Pick the person next to you and say, I want you to say it 3 ways, okay? So you say, I love you, but you say it in 3 different tonalities. And you say something like, I love you, or I love you, or I love you. And the other person has to guess what your tonation meant. What did it mean? Were you being sarcastic? Were you being loving? Were you being a muppet? What were you doing? So, just a couple of minutes. One do it 3 times, and then the other person do it 3 times. You can see the ones not joining in. Are you done? How did you get on? Who guessed all 3 right? Seriously? You two know each other? You guessed it right as well? And you guessed it right as well? You two know each other? You two know each other? Who guessed it right and didn't know the other person? No one. Who? You did. You're awesome. Who? Yes, sir. You rock. Right. Who got none right? Go on, you can admit to it. Who got none right? So what's the difference between getting it all wrong and getting it all right? Clearly, there's no wrong answer. It's only just feedback. Remember that? How did you know what she meant? Body language. Okay, how did you not know? What's the matter with you? I can tell you why. I'm guessing, but I can tell you why. You're not paying enough attention. You're just listening. You're not watching. You're not seeing what else is going on. You're not paying enough attention to the person in front of you or beside you. So as you listen to what they're saying and how they're saying it, what else are they doing? How are you supposed to manipulate someone if you're not paying attention? So we talked about this. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, representation systems. As you think about how you speak now and how you speak in conversation, whether you're talking to someone you know, friends, lecturers, anything, How do you say certain things? Do you say, I see? Do you say, that's not very clear? Do you say, I'm not really grasping it? Do you know how you speak? None of us. Start paying attention to how you speak. Because as you listen to how you speak, you'll pick it up in other people's language. And when someone comes up to you and says, and you've just explained something that is so easy, and they say, I'm not really hearing what you're saying, you go, auditory. And you change how you're saying it to match their auditory pattern. Does that make sense? Yeah? What does that allow you to do? We'll go and manipulate. But what I was thinking of was enter their world. So as you enter their world, you're leaving behind your visual processing and going into their auditory processing. And that allows you to enter their world. Now, from a manipulation perspective, that's much, much better, because what you do is you change your language to match their auditory pattern, and they understand, and you get rapport, which we're going to talk about in a little while. So who's ever thought about what kind of learner they are? Who's ever done those tests where, are you visual, auditory, kinesthetic? Yeah, a few people have done that, haven't they? So who knows what kind of learner they are? Who thinks it's nonsense? Gotta expect more hands than that. Before 2009, it was kind of accepted that this is what was taught. It was accepted to the point where in primary schools and secondary schools, teachers were expected to differentiate between learners of visual, auditory, kinesthetic styles. But then someone said, hang on a second, no one's done any research on this. Why? Why do I have to pretend that this 10-year-old is auditory? And then Pashler came along, and that's disconcerting, isn't it? And what they said was, well, who knows what Gardner did with the 11 intelligences? Gardner. So what they tried to do was link Gardner's established, validated, to a certain extent, psychological theory of the number of intelligences. Let me read them off to you. Have you heard of these already? Visual spatial, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic. Is that an intelligence? Bodily, if I'm going to fall over and I fall over, does that make me stupid? Interpersonal, intrapersonal, musical, and naturalistic. Is musical an intelligence in your opinion? I heard a yes. I see some nods. So that was Gardner's multiple intelligences theory. So they said, well, hang on a second. There's a couple of words here that look the same as what Gardner said. There must be a match. Not really. So a couple of other psychologists called Alcock and Hume argued that Gardner's multiple intelligence theory has influenced the learning styles approach by advocating matching instruction to students' preferred styles. So what, in essence, NLP said, years and years ago, you've got these styles, Gardner comes along, makes some legitimate theories, and then this gets linked to that, and all of a sudden, people pretend that NLP's got some credibility. Not necessarily the case. But what we can do is we can look at something else that's who's ever seen this before? Eye accessing cues. No one? What it's saying is, if you watch someone, if you ask someone a question, let me pick someone out randomly at the audience. You're not random, but have a think now. What colour is your front door? Don't tell me. Just have a think. Right, so she looked directly at me without saying anything. So on this scale, on this here, if they look directly at you, are they visually constructing or are they visually remembering? And it's visual remembrance because it doesn't say that because I can't put that on the slide, right? So is your front door white? Damn it. 90% of front doors were white. I picked the one person that's not white. Sorry. So if we look at this now, some of the questions that we can ask to determine whether someone is... What does this do for you if you are asking someone a question? What could it, in NLP terms, tell you about someone's response? Anyone? Yes, sir?
If they're lying or not.
And how does that then translate to let's manipulate them? We can figure out if we think they're lying. By the way, if you know someone's lying, how do you know? What lets you know that someone's lying? Shout out, anything. No eye contact. And fidgeting. My 10-year-old boy's always lying to me then. Yes, sir?
The way they talk.
The way they talk.
The way that they are like trying to remember what they want to say.
Trying to remember what they want to say. Who's ever done any research on what lying is? My grandmother always said, you know, the only people who need good memories are liars and thieves, right? Because you need to be able to remember the lie you said 5 minutes ago. If we know that if NLP offers us this awesome system for detecting someone's lying, we can ask them a question that says, what colour's your bedroom at home? Yellow. What would it look like if it were blue? And we can check if they go across to the visually constructed. Do you want to try it? That's a yes, by the way, if you don't answer. So there are a couple of questions here. Let's see if what NLP teaches is real. Okay, just with the person next to you, just a couple of questions. Ask them. Pay attention to their eyes and their body language. Okay, the ones that got 0 on the last bit, pay more attention this time. Okay, so just talk to the person next to you and ask them. You can change the questions, you can make something up. Okay. Okay, did it work? Did it work for anyone? Well, first question first. Who did it? And then, if you did it work? Or did it not work at all? I'm guessing it didn't work very well. Maybe you didn't do the whole 2-day course. You've got to go on a whole weekend course for NLP. An hour's not going to cut it. So let's look at the next thing then. This is what I asked earlier. Who thinks they're good at rapport? And what does rapport mean to you? Okay? Matching the modality, we kind of mentioned that earlier from a VAK, that kind of thing. Physical mirroring. When you see two people in a restaurant or just sitting together, do you notice that their bodies mirror? Their arms are folded in left and then right on the other side, and their legs are crossed or not crossed or whatever. You notice that? Fairly obvious stuff. You can, from an NLP perspective, you can do that on purpose to find out if you have control of the conversation. How? Go on. How do you think? If I'm sitting down and I cross my legs or my arms, and I change, and the person opposite me matches my change, half a second later, you're leading. Does that make sense? So as you're sitting with your friends next time, and you shift, see who shifts. You've got a higher social status than them. It's awesome. Unless I'm selling porkies. There was an interview, I'm going to have to read this one. There was an interviewer in The Observer in the 90s. None of you will remember the 90s. Interviewing a hypnotist. Every time the interviewer shifted in his position, the hypnotist had done the entire weekend course on NLP, and he knew that if he matched and mirrored the other person, he would have rapport. Okay? After about 5 minutes of doing this, the interviewee realized what was going on and started to do weird things just to see what would happen. But the point about the interviewee was that he recognized that the other person was doing it, and he thought at some stage that the interviewer was taking the pee. So when you do rapport badly or you do it wrong, it just comes across that you're being, you fill in that expletive there. So this failed because of the sensory acuity. So when I said check what the other people are doing, thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing, sensory, when you're listening for other people's languages, watch their body, watch their facial expressions, watch how they're doing things. That's you developing your sensory acuity to what other people are doing in front of you. The trick from a physical mirroring and matching their voice, matching their voice, we could spend 5 hours doing all these things. It's just so difficult to match someone's tone of voice. But not only the tone of voice, it's the cadence and how they speak. Do you have a friend who speaks really fast? Do you have a friend who speaks so slowly you just want to... Why would you want to match them? If you want to manipulate them. If you want to control them. Make sense? To establish rapport, the process is to mirror and match completely what the other person is doing. Who thinks that's a bit creepy? It really is. When you notice it, see it, and watch other people do it, if it's not completely in sync and at an unconscious level, it looks creepy. Calibration is one way of testing whether you're in rapport with someone. Who likes to piss people off with language or anything like that, on purpose, anytime they want? I'd expect a few more hands, but yes, me too. Right? I had to take out all the expletives and everything in my talk. So what I like to do is test my rapport skills by annoying someone and then seeing if I can get them back on side. Does that make sense? Now, am I manipulating them? It's just, I think it's an awesome superpower, but I only use it for good. So yes, I like to break rapport, then see if I can get it back. One of the things that we look at is meaning making. So for my PhD is about cognitive complexity, how complexly we think. And one of the things that differentiates you, me, is what we mean. So who here likes chocolate? I only like Cadbury's, no other chocolate. That's it. Don't get me Cadbury's fruit and nut, just Cadbury's, no mint, no orange should be mixed with chocolate ever. So if you said to me, Darren, you're going to the shop, can you get me a bar of chocolate? I say no, I don't know what you mean. For 30 seconds, a minute, what I want you to do is write down 8 adjectives that chocolate means to you, right? So for me, it's got to be Cadbury's, dairy, milky, fattening, that kind of thing. Just have a quick go. Write down as many words as you can for what chocolate means to you. All right, so who's written down a few words, even if it's just a few? Normally, I'd have a £10 note here, and I would say, shout out some words. If you had it written down and I could prove it, because I can't, there's a load of you. But if I could prove it, and if 2 of you had 3 words the same, I'd give you the £10 note. In 5 years of doing this, it's only happened once. And to be fair, at the end of the year, they bought me a bottle of wine with that, and that was all great. So, right, shout out some words. And if you hear a word that's been shouted out and you've got it, put your hand up.
Sugary.
Sugary. No one's got that. Maybe you. What else? Calories.
I've got that.
You got calories?
Yep.
Perfect. What else? Shout them out. Make it up, I don't care. Who said men? Brilliant. All right, so first of all, no one's shouting out, so my tenner's safe. Just by looking at the people next to you, did they get any words that are similar to yours? Or did you spend the whole time talking about your favourite chocolate? All right. So when we talk about meaning making and sense making from a complexity perspective, and I'm just giving you the illustration of chocolate here, and your lecturer says, can you do this, this and this for me? And you say, no, I don't know what you mean. If we don't know what we mean with just the word chocolate, how are we supposed to understand what someone means when they use a much more complex sentence, question, phrase? We don't. We think we do, but we don't. What we do is we represent what chocolate means to me, and I go with that. So when you listen to your lecturers and they ask you to do something, you take what they say, filter it, change it in your mind, make it match what you already know, and go with that. Does that make sense? So that you get the meaning that you need. Don't use that as an excuse not to do your next assignment, though. So, another way of controlling the conversation, another way of manipulating someone in front of you is by pacing and leading, not this kind of pacing. Pacing statements are icebreakers to help develop rapport. Pacing statements are great to use with anyone. Who makes this up? I must have made this up. Especially useful in sales environments. We'll have a look at that in a minute. It's the easiest way to calibrate if you're meeting with someone and if you think you've got rapport. What would you say, for those people who put their hand up earlier when I said who likes to annoy people and pee them off, what would you say to pee somebody off? No one's going to... If you didn't shout out at chocolate, you're not going to shout out this one, are you? Let's face it. Who said... Somebody almost said something.
Say I can't repeat what I say.
Oh, we're all adults. Well, I'm not, but... So, this is a sales technique. It's an undeniably true statement. So, you go into an office and you're trying to sell them anything, doesn't matter what it is, and you say, oh, you use a HP printer. That's a pacing and leading statement because the bloke or the woman has to say what? Yes, I do. There it is, look. In NLP terms, you've now got them on side. They're in your grasp. They're ripe for manipulation. It doesn't even require a verbal response. Who's ever heard of cold reading? All the ones who've watched Darren Brown, obviously. Yeah, anybody that believes in psychic mediums? Why isn't it media? Psychic mediums, they do cold reading and warm reading. I was actually going to do something like that here because I can do all that, but it would take too long. It works because if you don't require a non-verbal response, if I'm just looking at you and I watch you and we nod at the point where I've got your attention and I watch how you are and you get all scared and giggle, right, because I'm focusing on you. See, it works, right? I didn't even ask anything. But when you focus on that someone, or when you ask a question as simple as, oh, no, hang on, you've got a Mac laptop. Awesome, I've got a Mac laptop. We start to create a pace and leading situation, right? Now, I'm the one that initiated it. I'm the one that gave you a question that doesn't actually require a response. Of course you've got a Mac laptop. So now, in this case, I'm the one that's creating the situation. You will follow. Who here is confident enough to tell someone, mate, knock it on the head, you're talking crap. Who's confident enough to do that?
If I know them.
No, if you don't know them. We've got a few hands. I am. If you got, I mean, I've been to car sales and things like this to buy a car, and the bloke has just been an absolute arse. And I've told him, mate, you're being an arse. You know? So we talked about this a minute ago. How do you pace and lead non-verbally? Posture, which is what we talked about, but when you do it too much, it gets creepy. Weight distribution, what does that mean? Let me demonstrate. You can change. Oh, hand gestures, I did that at the same time. If you chop my hands off, I'd be speechless. Movement of feet, eye movements and degree of contact, facial expression, all these things. Maybe there should be another dot there. Breathing, who thinks you can pace and lead? Who thinks you can manipulate someone by matching their breathing pattern? This has actually been done. And actually, for once, it was demonstrated and written down, where they went into a room, and to make someone feel much calmer, the two people talking, the other person here did nothing but match and mirror the person breathing rate. Slowed down and match them. And as they did that, they then started to slow their own breathing rate, and the person here, the person who wanted to sell to, matched and calmed down and followed them. Unbeknownst to this person, complete manipulation. So, what about voice though? Now I have to shout a little bit to get you guys at the back to hear. We looked at this earlier on. Was it easy to match, to understand what they meant by pitch, tone, cadence, rhythm, tonality? It's not easy to do, which is why you need the whole weekend NLP course. Does everybody understand what pacing and leading is? You go in, you set the scene, you set the tone, you take control of the conversation, and you get them to follow you. How do you do that, though? Has anybody ever heard of these kind of things? Embedded commands. Embedded commands, as I'm sure you're aware, use things like tag-ons, yes? So in our language, you'll hear this done by interviewers on Radio 4. Clearly, you all listen to Radio 4, yes? Just me? Right, so you'll hear the interviewers on Radio 4 use these tag-on questions. When they're interviewing a politician who is just not answering the question. So they'll basically ask a question and answer it themselves. And the politician who's had training in NLP, because he's done that weekend, knows not to say anything. Maybe they're nodding, but I can't tell because it's Radio 4. Embedded questions. What about other control questions? Like my 10-year-old son, I say, Gabriel, would you like to do your homework before dinner or after dinner? What am I saying? It's a false choice. He's going to do his homework. I'm pretending I'm giving him a choice. Trouble is, he's getting clever. He can suss me out now. He says, no, Dad. That's it, really. So, Darren Brown did one in Blue Water, shopping centre down in Essex Way. And he used embedded commands and suggestions within his speech that he was talking on a microphone like this to the whole of Blue Water. If you've seen it, it's fantastic. And he doesn't say anything to anyone, but he's looking for the ones who are the most suggestible. Which also means that if you're very suggestible, you're going to be susceptible to embedded commands, to pacing and leading, to someone manipulating you. Which is why I asked you earlier, think about how you think about this. And eventually what happened was with Darren Brown, he got to the point where he said, stop and raise your right hand, and 40% of the people just walking around doing nothing, shopping, stopped and raised the right hand and looked around and said, why are we raising our hand? Because he got unconsciously into what they weren't even thinking about Darren Brown. This is the bottom one there. You can change as quickly or as slowly as you want to. That's a when you do a coaching qualification, if there is such a thing, they use these kind of questions that say, it says double-blind, a paradox question where it says, you can change as quickly or as slowly as you like. What is it implying? Exactly. I hear you all say it. It's implying change. It's implying you're going to change. It's up to you whether you change now or later. It's kind of like linguistic gymnastics, where you just befuddle the person in front of you. And that leads nicely on to something called sleight of mouth. You know what sleight of hand is, when magicians do these things. Dilts came up with this sleight of mouth, where we change phrases. This is really cool. I like this bit. When you basically, for those of you who are married, when you get into an argument with your wife, this is awesome. It wins every time. It's basically a vehicle for reframing. So, do you hear people say this to you, or just in general? They make me angry. So from a manipulation perspective, what you can do is you can get down to the structure of a person's thinking and say to them, how specifically do they make you angry? What does that do for the person who just said they make me angry? What are you questioning? What do you think? Who's they, for a start? Who are they? And how do they specifically do that? I want to work, but my aunt is ill. How does your aunt's illness stop you working? Do you always stop working when a relative is ill? So if your aunt wasn't ill, would you work? What are these questions designed to do? Yes, sir?
Undermine them.
Undermine them. What else? What does everybody think undermines the word? Her shouting upsets me. How specifically does her shouting cause you to be upset? Does anyone upset you? Or do you get upset because you're in control of you and it's your responsibility to be upset and not theirs to create it? Does anyone make you upset? Does anyone make you happy? Does anyone make you feel bad, good, indifferent? What this is doing is it's getting down to the structure of the person's thinking. It's saying, I know people who say they make me so angry, but they're vague. So when you question their vagueness, they stop and think. And by stopping and thinking, what does that do for their thinking structure? I agree. I was reading your mind. All right, that was better than it actually sounded. So this is what I'm talking about. Belief that you know what the other person is thinking. Now, who here knows what emotional intelligence is? And there's something called emotional regulation, where you're supposed to know what the other person is feeling in order to regulate them and you. In my humble opinion, which is not that humble, it's just not possible. So he's furious with me. So what you do is you question, how do they know that? How do you know their definition of furious and how they do it to you? I am no good. Well, good at what? How do you know you're no good? What has to be true for you to say that, believe that, and think that? What has to be true for you? Now, in this 1 hour, I'm giving you tons and tons of questions that are all NLP type questions and NLP phrases. I don't expect you to remember them. I barely remember them. But the underlying function and structure of what we're talking about here is to question how the person is thinking about whatever it is they're thinking about. Because once you get to the underlying structure, you can start to deconstruct how they think about themselves. How they think about themselves in context and in relation to you. So, I'm sure you can see how I feel. How many representation systems are in that one? How many representation systems are in this? We did it earlier. I know you've all got notes. Auditory. Almost. I can see is visual. How I feel is kinesthetic. So I'm sure you can see how I feel. You're mixing up those styles. Does that make any sense to anyone, or am I the only one thinking that it doesn't feel right? Feel right? Kinesthetic language. Yeah? This next question, this kind of thing here is brilliant from a manipulation perspective. Someone's sitting there and they're like this, and for a change, they're not comfortable, they are actually being defensive. Will you feel more comfortable with your arms unfolded? The only way to find out is to unfold their arms. So it's a yes or no, it's called a dichotomous question. So selling, who's ever been sold to and thought that the salesman was being a bit of a muppet? Because they were using language that you didn't like, they were making assumptions about what you do or don't like. One guy asked my wife, she said something about a loan for a car. We talked about car, and she said something about the loan and interest, stuff I don't understand. And he said, oh, well, what that means is, and he went into a patronising banter about what a loan and interest rates were. And I said, mate, she runs a bank. She knows more than you do about it. Don't assume. But he did that about 3 times. Oh, I'd like this car. Oh, you know, that's a very big car, don't you? Which is true, because she can't drive. I'm kidding, she's better than me. Salesmen, basically, they're taught bad techniques. They're taught things where they're taught this kind of thing. It's an NLP technique from a manipulation perspective. What they do is they are the salesman, they walk along, and the customer is walking behind them, and as they walk, they accidentally drop their key. And what they do is they wait, and they wait for the customer to pick up the key. And if the customer picks up the key and says, excuse me, you've dropped this, they then think, got them. Because these guys are emotionally led, they can't see me hurt, I know how to manipulate them into a sale. If you translate that to children today under the age of 12, and you drop your key, they just walk past going, he's dropped his key. Right? Because the research on iPads and what kids do with iPads has shown that sense of connection that we have, at my age, 25, that sense of connection we've got, that yes, his keys are dropped, and he might need them, isn't necessarily the case for 10-year-olds, because they don't have the emotional and social connection because they've been messing about with iPads for 5 or 6 years. Does that make sense?
Is that a good thing or bad?
If you use iPads to change the classroom, because what we're doing now is not changed in 200 years. Someone standing at the front and a bunch of people out there, it's 200 years old. What we need to be doing is interactive. I don't like lecture, I don't like this at all. I prefer, as you can understand, I like people to join in and shout out, right? You don't get that a lot, I'm guessing, right? I think lectures like this should be much more interactive. I should be sitting in the middle, and we should all be talking about the slides. Does that make sense? Which is a bit more of a seminar way of looking at things. So when you go into, from an NLP perspective, what we don't do is we don't tease out people's values. What was the last big thing someone bought here? I don't mean size, I mean like a car or a nice set of speakers. That might be a male. A nice set of speakers or that kind of thing. What was a big thing that someone bought recently?
Rent.
Not rent, you haven't got much choice on that one. So, well, you have. Someone bought a what? A computer. So when you go into PC World or the Apple Store, do they ever say to you, what's important to you about a computer? Right? What are they trying to do when they do that? They're trying to elicit your values. Because if you go in to buy a computer or a car, and they say, what's important to you about a car? And you say, well, it's got to be fast, it's got to be red, it's got to have a reverse gear, it's got to have a lot of space. You're eliciting their values. What we never see is we never see a salesman go, you know what, Darren, we haven't got that car for you, but if you go to the Porsche garage, they've got just the car for you. Why? Because the car salesmen are not that developed in their thinking to say, we can't help you, go over there. They don't elicit my values. Instead what they do is they try to manipulate me to buy the car they've got in stock. By saying, yeah, we can match that, we can do all those things. You need a car. Just car just gets you from A to B. Who's ever heard of the yes set? Yes set is excellent. Try it when you get home. What a salesman will do is they'll ask you questions like, is your name Darren? Yes. Are you male? Yes. Did you drive here? Yes. Do you like coffee? Yes. Do you want to buy a car? Yes. Oh, So they trick you into the yes set by asking you questions that they know you're going to say yes to. Who is quite confident that that would never work on them? I get that general impression of you. You put your hand up every time. Good man. So, next time you go somewhere and they ask you questions which are so obvious, yeah? Oh, you got a great jumper on? Yes. Hang on, what's going on here? It's because they're trying to work that rapport. They're trying to force rapport. Two, they're trying to give you an unchoiced question. That's not a good word. What's the word for that? A question where the obvious answer is yes. And then by the third question, you've determined that I'm going to say yes to all of them. Then the fifth question is going to be, would you like to buy this car? And you've said yes, because you weren't aware. So if we look at the sleight of mouth, which we looked at a minute ago, sleight of mouth is used by the sales guys. This is actually taken from a website of a company that sells sleight of mouth patterns and sleight of mouth training, which for me is the dark side of psychology. On the Moodle thing, I suspect that the link to this is somewhere. But win every argument, conquer every negotiation, close every sale, and eliminate all objections. What does that sound like to you? What does that sound like to you? What's a word that's missing out of all this that we get drummed into us at a university or an organisation? Where's the integrity? But if you want to manipulate someone, do you have to abandon all integrity? If you want to get that sale, if you want to make your bonus, do you need to abandon your integrity? Or do you need to just change it slightly? So I haven't done them all, you'll be pleased to know, but there are 14 different responses or manipulations you can use. So for example, now I've done it here. Who's had this said to them? Your being late shows you don't care about this class or your education. Who's ever been so late that the lecturer said that? Or the teacher or whatever. So what you do is you look at the structure of that question. Be on time. You look at the structure of that question. Your being late shows you don't care about this class. Who says I should care? Why should I care? I've never heard of NLP. Or your education. It's just a tick box exercise. I'm only doing it to please my parents. All right, they're the wrong answers, by the way. How do you know? Let's reframe it in a more positive way. How do you know lateness and caring are the same thing? You being late means you don't care. Late care. Late. What's the association? Anybody? Do you care? Do you care? But is there an association in your mind? Some people believe caring is shown by quality of the job done and the results obtained. In other words, does it matter if I'm late if I get the job done and I do it well? So you automatically question your body, in this case your boss, your lecturer, whatever. Your being late means you don't care. But I can still get my work done. I still hand an assignment in. I'm still awesome. And one of my favourite ones, which is the one that works with my wife, is when she says, this means that, which this is called a complex equivalent, that's what this is. This means that we all know people who are always on time and they're rubbish. So why do I have to be on time if I'm awesome? All right, not necessarily for you guys. It's nearly 6 o'clock. All right, we're going to have to close it down soon. We'll move on to the next one. Right, from a final one, this is my research. What we're saying is that we can break down our thinking using these individual thinking preferences, which I've called cognitive intentions. If you know how someone's thinking breaks down, you can use these individual cognitive intentions to manipulate and control how they think, what they think, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it. Does that make sense? This is my research. So if you were, this is not a thing, but if you were to do a profile, we would break your thinking down like this. I do it with MBA students down in London, and I tell them how they think, and then I tell them how their thinking breaks down to the point where we can change how they think and change how they construct themselves. If you know how you construct yourself, you know how someone else can deconstruct themselves, then you can start to create rapport, then you can start to manipulate if you want to go that far. Okay? one of the problems with NLP is that there's no vetting system. But then, how many here were vetted before they came into this course? You don't have to pass any exams. Well, that's different from regular. You get a certificate, basically, for showing up. Trainers install a can-do attitude, which is very American in this sense, and then send you on your way. So one of the main problems is you could do an entire weekend course of NLP training, and you could go out and call yourselves a therapist. How is that any? I mean, where's the integrity in that? There's actually an academy called the Coaching Academy that does just that kind of thing. It's 6 o'clock. I should have stopped 10 minutes ago. Any questions, any thoughts? Thanks very much.